What happens when a genuinely game-changing idea collides head-on with the harsh realities of manufacturing, financing, and global trade? That's exactly the story we're unpacking today, and it all centers around a company called Origin Materials. On paper, Origin looks like the kind of company we root for. They have a smart, elegant solution to one of the world's biggest environmental problems: plastic waste. But their journey also shows just how brutal it can be to move from breakthrough innovation to real-world scale. This is a story about ambition, timing, execution, and the very real obstacles that stand between a great idea and commercial success. It all started with what should have been a defining moment. After years of development, Origin's CEO announced something huge. Their product wasn't just stuck in a lab anymore. It wasn't a prototype. It was real. It was on store shelves, in the hands of actual consumers. A genuine world first, and the kind of milestone that usually signals the start of a new growth chapter. But before we go further, let's talk about what this product actually is, because the idea is surprisingly simple, and that's what makes it so powerful. Think about a standard plastic bottle. The bottle itself is usually made from PET plastic, but the cap? That's almost always a different plastic, HDPE or polypropylene. And here's the problem. When that bottle gets recycled, the mismatched cap becomes a contaminant. It complicates the process, reduces efficiency, and often lowers recycling rates altogether. Origin flipped that on its head. They developed a bottle cap made from the same PET material as the bottle. One material, one stream, a true mono-material package. No separation needed, no contamination. Everything gets recycled cleanly together. That alone is a big deal, but it gets better. This PET cap also has superior barrier properties. It keeps oxygen out and carbon dioxide in, which is absolutely critical for carbonated drinks. It can be made using 100% recycled PET, and it's cost competitive with traditional caps. Simple, scalable, and environmentally meaningful. Honestly, it's an elegant solution across the board. With that kind of product in hand, Origin set its sights on going commercial. And they weren't thinking small. The global caps and closures market is worth over $65 billion. This isn't a niche opportunity, it's a foundational part of global packaging. But instead of trying to conquer everything at once, Origin made a smart strategic choice. They started with a beachhead, specifically the bottled water segment, a roughly $7 billion market, using the extremely common 1881 cap, the one you see on most water bottles every day. The idea was simple: prove the model, build traction, then expand outward. And for a while, it was working. They landed their first products on shelves. They signed a major distribution deal with Berlin Packaging. They established European manufacturing with Royal Hordijk. And their sales pipeline grew to more than 70 potential customers. Momentum was building. It genuinely felt like the commercial engine was waking up. And then, the pivot. Because this is where the story shifts from innovation to execution. And execution, as it turns out, is unforgiving. Scaling production proved far more complicated than expected. Origin ran into a perfect storm of challenges. Cash constraints made it difficult to buy the expensive machinery needed to ramp up production. That caused delays. And then came the tariffs. Equipment sourced from Europe was hit with US import tariffs, 15% from the EU and a staggering 39% from Switzerland. That's not a rounding error. That's a gut punch. The impact was immediate. Origin slashed its 2026 revenue forecast from $50 to $70 million down to just $20 to $30 million. That's not a trim. That's a reset. And with it came a cascading effect. The timeline to reach break-even moved from 2026 to 2027. Profitability suddenly felt much further away. So Origin had no choice. They had to pivot, and fast. What emerged was a new financial playbook built around survival and flexibility. It had three core parts: raise adaptable financing, lean hard into European manufacturing to avoid tariffs, and eliminate major legal distractions. To secure capital, the company turned to senior secured convertible notes. In plain English, that's a loan backed by company assets, with the option for lenders to convert debt into equity later. It's not ideal, but it bought Origin time and breathing room. That European partnership with Royal Hordic? Suddenly, it looked like a masterstroke. By producing caps in Europe for European customers, Origin could sidestep US tariffs entirely. A direct solution to a massive cost problem. And finally, they cleaned house. In October 2025, Origin settled shareholder lawsuits. The settlement was fully covered by insurance, with no admission of wrongdoing. For management, this wasn't about blame, it was about focus. Clearing distractions so the team could execute. Which brings us to the present and the big question mark. The road ahead is a balancing act between opportunity and risk. And the most immediate threat is this. Origin stock has fallen below $1, the minimum required to stay listed on NASDAQ. They received their first warning back in April 2025. They got an extension, but the final deadline is April 6, 2026. That clock is ticking. Fail to regain compliance, and delisting becomes a real possibility, making future fundraising far more difficult. And that's just one risk. There's potential shareholder dilution from the convertible notes. There's execution risk in hitting revised production targets. And there's macro risk. Trade policies, tariffs, and economic conditions can always change again. So when you strip it all down, Origin Materials leaves us with a timeless question. They have a breakthrough product, one the world arguably needs. But history tells us that innovation alone doesn't guarantee success. So what will ultimately define Origin's future? The power of their idea or the brutal difficulty of execution? That's the story, and the answer is still being written.
Signing off, Katina Media, the premier source for your tech news and information.